Get you a bit more leg room there, if I may. You're welcome. Hello. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. What is this?
Charging port.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
These are pretty cool.
Kind of handy thing, yeah.
And you got it hooked up to the car for power then?
I do, yeah. Yeah, it's hooked right up front here. I've got a couple on this side and one on the front here.
And
Yeah,
all three major chargers too.
Indeed, just to cover the bases, right?
Yeah.
Sandro, a couple of things to mention. My name is Binyam.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Secondly, in my Uber, I do something a bit unusual. I live stream my Uber, so I just wanted you to be aware at the outset so you don't say things or you're like, I don't care for that not going online or whatever, yeah. And yeah, I used to be a school bus driver out in this area.
Did you?
And I rarely get an opportunity to come out this way, so I thought, oh, I'm early enough, I think. And instead of like waiting outside your house and making you feel rushed or whatever, I thought, I need to take a walk down memory lane here. So that's what I was doing.
Yeah, fair enough.
But it must have seemed kind of unusual when you're like, you missed the turnoff by quite a bit there.
Well, and you know, there's that gate there, right? So you can get all the way to the end of this road.
Yeah.
And in the old Google Maps,
Yeah.
people used to go that way, right? But now it's been updated, and so maybe 5-10 years ago,
And it's not an option.
people would get stuck at that
I
gate.
see.
And would,
I see.
oh,
Gotcha.
there's my alarm that you're coming.
Ah, here I am. It's a nice little piece of paradise up here, though, isn't it?
Yeah, we love it. Although we got back from Florida yesterday, so
Oh, I see.
that was a little different climate.
Yep, yep.
But yeah, we love it out here.
The views too, though, right?
Yeah,
I don't think I've ever actually come out this way here, so it's kind of tucked away here.
it is, and it's a way to live in the country but not have an acreage.
Ah, I see, I see. And you still have space.
We got tons of space.
Yeah.
I mean, we back onto the golf course, right? So it feels like an acreage, but
Without the responsibilities. How long have you guys been out here for?
out here for, gosh, about 15 years.
Okay.
Well, I went to junior high school and high school out here.
Oh, you did?
So my parents moved out here in
Gotcha.
the 80s.
Okay. So it's familiar territory.
Oh yeah, this
Yeah.
is about as home as it gets for me. So what do you do if you're live streaming?
I before live streaming, I was actually creating videos about my experience as an Uber driver,
Yeah.
and basically, it seems I tapped a section of the internet that really appreciates quality conversations and good people connections, right?
Yeah.
And I thought this is a really neat way to be able to spread a bit of, I don't know, inspiration and encouragement out there in the midst of so much that just seems to be other than that, right? And so that's what I primarily do, is just share meaningful conversations and you know, connections that you like. That was a really good connection there. And so
Yeah.
that's the thrust of what motivates my engagement online.
Yeah. No, fair enough. Sounds like a fun hobby.
It is. One of the things that I fell in love with when I moved out here was how much sky you have access to here.
How much what?
Sky. Like you can just like crane your head from one end to the other, and it's just, I mean, I guess there's a reason why Springbank Airport is a great place for training out here too, but
Yeah, they it's funny, right? Because especially the blue sky, right? Like,
Yeah.
you get so much sunshine.
yeah,
When you say you moved out here, where did you move from?
BC.
Oh, you came from BC.
I did. I grew up in
Where?
Kamloops.
In Kamloops.
That's right.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah,
That's a beautiful province.
it is. It's a beautiful province indeed.
Is it?
No, I don't. Well, that's actually interesting. I just noticed that I love BC for sure. I'm not a fan of Alberta in general, is how I say it, but Calgary specifically, I think there's just a combination of so many factors that make this a sweet spot in the whole province. So I've worked up in Edmonton and Grand Prairie and further north as well. And they weren't my jam, but here in Calgary, like that amalgamation of the sky, for example, the horizon of the mountains, the city skyline, the Chinooks in the winter. These are some of the things that just made me think this is a beautiful setting, and I've known for a long time as well that I'm inclined to the city life. I like being in the city. I like being around where lots of people are.
That means we're on different trajectories.
You and I.
Yeah, no, I love visiting cities.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
I every time I'm like downtown or
Yeah.
whatever, I don't want to do it. And it's
Totally fair.
Yeah, that doesn't mean I don't like, go to New York or anything like
No,
that.
for visits, right?
It's just kind of the day-to-day. I like being out in
In the country.
But yeah, it's funny. It is a great city.
I think so.
And, I'm a homer, so obviously I've been. But I left for about 6-7 years and lived in the States for there and
Okay.
enjoyed it there. But
Yeah.
it was not. In the end, Calgary drew me back.
Yeah.
And as we prepare to, retire,
Yeah.
those are the discussions my wife and I are having. Right, we're
Right.
trying to figure out. Weather-wise, obviously that's not great.
So what were the catalytic components that said we're coming back here out of all the options you had? Why
For
Calgary?
coming back.
Yeah.
I just liked home, friends, family.
nostalgic,
My
yeah.
brother was here, my parents are here.
Yeah.
And great high school friends.
Yeah.
I went to a small high school.
Yeah.
And,
Just one across the way there.
and our graduating class was maybe 60 people.
Tiny.
So everybody knew everybody.
Yeah.
Back then, this was not as busy as it is now. But yeah, there's something about it, right? Like
Yeah.
there's just, and then Calgary's Canadiana, and then, obviously business opportunities, and then sports. I love sports and hockey, and so I love golf. There's tons of golf here, right?
Yeah.
So there's all these things which you can find in different places as well. But,
Sure.
well, it's I think Calgary gets 5,000 people every month.
Currently?
Yeah, I think we're adding about 5,000 people a month, a combination of migrants and immigrants,
Yeah.
but a lot of migrants. So a lot of Canadians that
Yeah.
are doing exactly what you did,
Displacing.
leave BC, or I think BC's been, and obviously Ontario, tons around from Ontario as well.
Yeah.
And you see it, right? Like you
Yeah.
go to a Flames game, and
Yeah.
if they're playing another Canadian team, half the fans are there from cheering for the other
Yeah,
one.
they
That
see
just
it.
shows you that Calgary's made up of a bunch of Canadians.
The representation is, quite varied. Honestly, since I moved to Canada, I've never really understood or tapped into the spectator sports. So, going to a hockey game, I haven't even been to the stadium yet, or the
Well, you don't have much
arena.
time.
I know,
2-3
I
years,
know.
you're gonna rip it down.
That's what I heard, and someone said I'd better get in there and experience something of it at least.
Where did you move from?
Originally, grew up in Kenya, but I was born in Ethiopia.
Really?
Indeed.
Wow.
But I was very young when we moved to Canada, so I've been 8.
We moved at the same time.
Really now?
I moved from Switzerland when I
Oh,
was
you
8.
don't say.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So the same thing. Obviously, it wasn't my choice. My
Right.
family brought me here.
Yeah.
2 of my brothers went back to Switzerland, 10, 20 years later after school. And 2 of us stayed.
Okay. So, your experience acclimatizing to the culture, was it a challenging one or
No,
seamless?
and that's sports, right?
Oh, I see. Yeah.
I went to elementary school.
Yeah.
And I could play soccer, and I even played hockey in Switzerland actually. Right?
Okay.
So there was these kids there,
Yeah.
and they were kicking around a soccer ball,
Right.
and you don't need to know how to speak English
Yep,
to
yep.
say, can I play?
Yeah.
And I don't even remember learning English.
Wow.
It was just every day I'd go and play soccer, and then you'd learn and make friends, and,
Yeah.
and the rest is, gosh, within half a year probably. At that age, you learn fast, right? You probably learn fast too, right?
It took me, I already knew English.
Oh,
So
you
in
did?
Kenya, we spoke English.
Right.
Yeah. So I came with English. I did have a stutter that I had to work through. So that was speech impediments of sorts. So that wasn't the issue, but for me it was more so understanding the culture, the humor, the
Yeah.
social engagements. That took a couple years.
So there's things that are different between Europe and Canada, but
Yeah.
I would imagine the differences aren't as
Stark.
pronounced as what you would find coming from. I've never been to Africa, so I don't know.
Well, even back then, this is pre-internet too. This is like late '80s for me when I moved over here and immigrated with my family. So the world did seem a lot more distance. It seemed a lot more. The contrast was greater. So we didn't have resources to see what life was like here in North America. So it was definitely coming into a newer setting.
And in the 80s,
Yeah.
you know, the Calgary population was a bunch of Calgarians. Now you have communities that, you know, Asian communities,
Yep.
you have Sikh communities,
Yeah.
you have huge communities.
Yeah,
And I'm talking tens of
absolutely.
thousands of people, not,
Yeah.
you know, one
Small little
community.
nucleus. Yeah.
So when you look up the makeup of Calgary, it's so tons of migrants, but also, like I said, large immigration groups as well. And I think it's specific types that are known. So engineering's a big thing, right? So
Yeah.
the engineers
I've seen that.
from Asia,
Yeah.
a lot of them find Calgary is a great place to come to. And then, like I said, the Sikhs are so represented in Calgary. And
Yeah.
I only mean that statistically.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many compared to how many there are
Of other.
in India, right? And I think they make up 2% of the Indian population.
Oh,
and
goodness.
they make up like 80% of the Calgary population.
Wow.
Right. So
Yeah.
there are things, and the Swiss as well.
Yeah.
Tons of Swiss and Germans here.
Really?
As well.
I haven't
Of
met
course.
Swiss yet. Okay.
Well, I'm Swiss.
Oh yeah. But the other component in my experience was when we moved here. Of course, there's a city nucleus that has a lot more representation of your culture, perhaps.
Yeah.
But our setting was more in smaller communities and tiny. So like eventually we ended up in Kamloops, which is not a big city.
Yeah.
And before that, we were in smaller settings, like 100 Mile House. I don't know if you've heard of 100 Mile House.
Yeah.
Tiny little hamlet, even north there. So that's where a lot of my growing up was. There was no other black people there.
Yeah.
So that acclimatization curve was even steeper.
I can imagine, right? It's,
Yeah.
I think it'd be easier now
Yes.
than it was. You can, you know,
Yeah.
move here and never have to submerge yourself, because in Western Canadian culture, you can technically live here and exist in whatever community you're from.
Agreed. Yeah. And find resources as well. Like access to resources is far more accessible today than it was then.
Yeah. Well, it's a crazy time, right? Like,
It
there's
is.
so much going on. But what I remember is, and what I still feel to this day.
Yeah.
So, like when I look at waste,
Yeah.
I think that the waste it's ridiculous in Calgary, right? Like how much waste of food and whatever, and garbage. And that you just look at garbage day, right?
Yeah.
And in Switzerland, you have all these rules and bylaws about what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do, right? With respect to waste. And so there's that I always see, and I learned that actually when I was back in Switzerland. I was having a summer job there.
Yeah.
And I had garbage, and I just went into a bin and threw it into one of the big bins, and someone came and said, "Hey, that's not your bin. Your bin's over here, and you're only allowed to use one bag per week, just so you know," and this and that. And I'm like, okay, fair enough, right? Like you learn how much and they maybe go through the family of four will go through, you know, one bag of garbage a week.
I see the same, like I have the same sensitivity or awareness of what you're speaking of. And in one way, I don't fault as heavily of this culture, because what you and I have access to is contrast. We know what it's like in an area where there's a lot more attention to what you're throwing away, or in my case, there's just always like you're scrimping and checking your crumbs, basically, in essence, right? So for me, in this experience here, and it's been a long time since I've seen that kind of waste, because I used to work in the restaurant industry once upon a time, and that was really challenging to see that, for example. I used to be a tree planter at one point, and one of my friends was from India, and he was here planting with us, and the way he saw of what we did with the wood, he was saying, there's so much waste that goes on even on the block here this way, whereby he was saying this would be just gold back in India, and here we're just kind of discarding it like nothing. So there's that awareness, I think, that comes from the contrast from what the other side looks like that you and I have.
And I teach my kids, right? If we go do fast food, my rule is, if you eat it, I pay for it. If you don't, you pay So very quickly, they go from 20 nuggets down to 6 nuggets, right? And they're like, well, I gotta eat it or else I gotta pay for it. And so we have these little things, and same as when my wife and 2 kids go out,
Yeah.
often I won't order.
Yeah.
So I like everything.
Sure.
And I'll go, you guys all go ahead and
Yeah.
eat what you want.
Yeah.
I'll just have a
Eat the
third of
left.
each of yours.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, so I think the sensitivity to that is one thing that
Yeah.
sticks with me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's still. I feel uncomfortable when I see that kind of waste happening, and I think your way is brilliant. It's a very clever way of getting them on the same page.
Yeah, and you just try to instill certain values as a
Yeah.
parent in your kids, right?
Yeah.
And you try to, whether that's kindness or waste or whatever we're not perfect by any means.
True.
Like I just had to throw away strawberries, and so that's wasted food, right? And so
Yeah.
you kind of have that.
But that's like a perishable that has a time limit, I guess, too, right?
Right.
Yeah.
You can leave your strawberries. But yeah.
When you moved here, did your folks acclimatize well, or did they kind of keep strong to their roots from their Swiss culture?
Yeah, that's. I think the answer is both.
Both and
They were able to keep their roots,
yeah.
but I think they also,
Yeah.
within 10 years, my parents would have a stampede breakfast every summer at their place.
Oh,
right?
wow,
They'd buy
okay.
So I think they did both.
They kind of bought into some of the culture.
Right, and
I
so
see.
my mom still goes to the Swiss Folks dance every year, and
Amazing.
so there's things they have that
Yeah.
that allow them to be true to their roots while acclimating. Yeah, I think they did a good job. They also, my mom could speak quite good English when we moved here, so
Yeah.
the first 3 years
Yeah.
when we would come home, my
Yeah.
mom would only speak English with us.
Okay.
And then at some point, me and
Yeah.
my brothers would come home and we'd only speak English.
Uh-huh.
And then they started speaking only Swiss with us so that we wouldn't lose
Uh-huh.
our native tongue.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. One of the things I often enjoy doing is thinking, again, in that contrast zone of what could this culture that I've grown up in now benefit from if it were to look at my culture and the things that they do well, and then vice versa, what could my culture learn from this cultural context that they're like doing really well on? What would that look like in the Swiss culture?
yeah, well, like I said, waste and public transport is probably the 2 biggest things, right?
Gotcha.
And then I think politics is a pretty interesting one, right? You look at how divisive right now North American politics is.
Mhm.
You cannot have a discussion
Yeah.
without,
Getting personal.
becoming personal.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I find that, in Switzerland, you get together with your buddies and you
Yeah.
sit and you discuss politics.
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
you say, well, this is what works here, this
Yeah.
is what works here.
Yeah.
And so I think that's another big one, kind of that ability to just say not everything's black and white, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so I find that, if I was a U.S. citizen, I would be a swing state,
Okay.
right? I think there's good things about one, there's good things about the other,
Mm-hmm.
and I can't if I'm sitting with Democrats,
Yeah.
all you can do is talk about how dumb the people that voted are, and then if you're sitting with Republicans, all you can talk
Same
about
thing.
is how dumb the Democrats are. They don't
Yeah.
understand,
Yeah.
and I think that is probably the 2-3 things.
So there's a different ethos in the Swiss culture in relation to
Well,
politics.
and the political system's set up differently, so you don't have this division where you have to pick one or the other,
Okay.
right? And the whole representative, it's not representative neither in Canada or in the U.S.,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's you can have a popular vote and win, and it's so that part's interesting, right? In Switzerland, you go to vote about 5 times a year or 7 times a year.
Oh, seriously?
And you vote on issues.
Okay.
And the issue might be some garbage law, and maybe only 20% of the country goes and votes.
Yeah.
But you vote on everything. So it doesn't matter what party you belong to, because you're gonna vote on the big issues,
Yeah.
and regardless of the party, and then the issues are decided by the people.
Right.
And so when something like, do you want to join the European Union?
Yeah.
Huge issue.
Yeah.
80% of the eligible
Show up.
voters go and
Yeah.
show up, and then,
Yeah.
that is not a party vote.
Yeah. That's
So
a
you
specific
could-
individual.
Right. So you could
Yeah.
have views as a Republican and as a Democrat,
Yeah.
and say, okay, well, I'm for abortion, but
Yeah.
I'm against immigration being
Right.
too loose or something like that, and then
Yeah.
you know, that allows you to combine those different party values.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And
Yep.
so I think that would be interesting to have it, to see what would happen if it was voted on, right? And then
Sure.
obviously you're still gonna toe the party line the
Yeah.
majority of the times.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah.
What do you see from Kenya?
Yeah.
Do you go back often?
No.
You've never been back?
I've only been back once to Ethiopia. Not
Ethiopia.
Yeah. So Kenya is where I grew up, but Ethiopia is my home country.
Right.
So that's the culture that I know much better. So we went back once a decade ago. It's a very expensive trip for a large family.
I know.
But it was meaningful to visit for sure. What I see by contrast is, okay, so I think there's a sense of honor that the young have for the older generations in my culture that has been deeply baked in, right? Saying here, for example, the kids eat first. There, the kids eat last.
Yeah.
The parents, take that place of prominence, and so there's that deference, if you will, which I think is healthy.
Yeah, there's some kind of respect, or the kids are running the show right now, right? And
Yeah.
we're seeing the extreme of that with what happens with cell phones in schools,
Yeah.
and what you are calling them, and what their names are, and what they identify
Yeah.
as, and where they want their rights, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's
It's a disconnect of sorts, right? A disconnect in helping young minds get acquainted with a world that has a certain order that
Yeah.
it's helpful for you to acclimatize to. And in the absence of it, it's a hard go.
well, and it's what does that lead to? In some cases, it leads to independent thought and just a general independence from young teenagers, which is amazing, right? But then
Mhm.
other times it just leads to chaos,
Yeah.
and so I think it's
Yeah.
it's a tough one. I like that
Yeah.
kind of respect for your elders, right?
Yeah, and even I've worked with kids and teens for years, and there's a way that I've learned how to make those connections relationally so that I can extend influence, because I'm very intentional when I spend time with them, saying, okay, where's this going to go, and where's that flow of influence going? So that's something I've worked at over the years that I've had in the various contexts in which I've worked with kids. I really appreciate that, and it's always I told you I was in that neighborhood. I used to drive a school bus in
Yeah.
addition to teaching as well. And one of the things I would often do, I would often look for, as quickly as I could, a way, Sandro, to be able to connect with the family context. So here's the child that I'm working with. But as soon as I could, I wanted to meet the parents,
Yeah.
both sides. Just want to say, hey, just so you know who's going to be influencing your kid, I'm going to make a connection here. I know my skill set. I'm able to win their hearts. I have a high anticipation this is going to go amazing, but I need you to know I have an agenda.
Yeah.
And when I win your kid's heart, I want you to know where I'm going to go by way of the influence I want to extend, and the way I want to come alongside your family and affirming this foundation for their continual engagement socially. Right? That's really important. So it was a really wonderful opportunity, but yes, I have seen that stark contrast. And even growing up in the midst of it too, that was kind of confusing for me, seeing the way.
Yeah, if you watch how kids are,
Yeah, for sure.
you'll see it in sports too, how they treat their coaches, how they
Sure.
treat their referees.
I used to be a referee for years for soccer. I
You?
played soccer for years, but then eventually I moved into refereeing, and I knew even as a player, you knew what kind of game you're going to have by who was stepping on the fields to officiate, right? And I, as a bus driver, in the many contexts, I I try to be tactful about it, Sandra, but there was a definitive expectation I laid down, saying here's the flow here, and
Yeah.
here's who's going to listen to whom. So that was important. I would say what my culture could learn from this culture, however, I don't know if my culture has much tolerance or bandwidth for acknowledging that mental health is something that's worthwhile attending to. Just like, get over it, you know.
Like they've had a huge push in the right direction with that here, right? Mental health,
Absolutely.
especially for men.
Yes, yeah, spot on.
And they're
Shifting a whole cultural way of thinking.
And red light camera in
Yeah.
300 meters.
yeah, it's funny. You have discussions
50
now, and
kilometers
it's
per hour.
even something like getting a colonoscopy.
Yeah.
So I just turned the age where you have to get it.
Yeah.
Colon, you don't have to, but it's suggested.
Yeah.
And I talk to all my buddies about it.
Yeah.
That discussion used to be quite different 10 years ago
Sure.
than it is now. Now everybody's like, did you do it?
Yeah,
I'm gonna
yeah.
do it too, or did you do it?
Yeah,
And you kind
yeah.
of,
Normalize it.
yeah, and I know that's not mental health, but
It chips away at those old narratives of what was.
and you don't have that back in Ethiopia.
No, not at all. Like, I think, excuse me, it's probably changing now with the younger generations and them having access to social media. So there's some good aspects, perhaps, of social media that will bring this into the conversation. But definitely with my generation and older, I would still say it's that struggle again, because there's a communal buy-in into the story that everyone believes or subscribes to, and it's a kind where there is not a lot of acknowledgement that we have stuff that we need to process, and we need help processing that stuff, and there are consequences socially when we leave things undealt with, from abusive communication habits to breakdown in disconnect in social in the social fabric, if you will. So there's components there. I think that there's been a lot of growth in this context here, where it's like we're saying a lot more in the conversation. It's not uncommon to hear it, but over there it sounds foreign. To the point, I even talk to the kids now, and they're like, "Yeah, my parents, I would never tell them I'm seeking therapy." For example, right? Because they don't understand the necessity, or they're like, "Why? Like, what's wrong with you? Like, that's just made up stuff."
Yeah. Wow, and you have a significant amount of issues now in school that may or may not be related to social media, or at least kind of screen time, whatever that screen time is. Right?
Sure enough.
It's
Yeah.
there's a reason. I forgot which. Some country, I want to say New Zealand, but
Yeah.
I might be wrong. That's looking at making law that you can't be on social media till you're 60.
Oh, I just heard about this
Is that
recently
France,
too.
maybe? I don't know which country it was, but it's a country.
Yeah.
And it's
Australia.
I think it might be Australia. It might be
I
New Zealand,
think.
Australia.
Yeah, somewhere down
but
there.
we're
I just
and
read that.
Quebec's watching it.
Yeah.
And that says a lot to me.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's an acknowledgement there
Yeah,
that
yeah.
something is wrong.
Yeah.
And so one is, are you allowed to talk about the final result, i.e. mental health issues, or are you even looking at solving the issue at hand, which maybe this is what the problem is, right?
Yeah.
And we all, as parents, we all battle with our kids
Yeah.
about cell phone use,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And about, I think that's huge, right? We didn't have that.
I'm really, I'm going through a really amazing book right now called "How to Raise a Healthy Gamer."
A healthy gamer.
Yes, How to Raise a Healthy Gamer.
Yeah.
The individual who wrote this book is a psychiatrist now, and he also teaches at Harvard as well. But he's writing from his personal experience from decades into his adulthood of addiction to gaming
Yeah.
devices, etc. And so he eventually was able to get help and figure some stuff out as well. But in his book, as he's writing, what I appreciate is it's a fairly balanced approach where he's not saying just get rid of it cold turkey. It's more like he's saying let's understand what this does physiologically to a person when a person is addicted. Here's what they're getting from this. Here's how it's serving them. Here's what it's feeding by way of their perceived needs. probably in a realm where they're struggling in the real world, where they may not have athletic skills, they may not be given a second glance notice, they may feel really insecure about their appearance. But here's the online world where they get to work at a skill, gain competence, gain acknowledgement, be able to, experience the thrill of like acceptance in a social setting, because it is an online community when you're gaming with others internationally around the world and so on like that. But his basic premise is not only to understand that impact that it has on an individual, but also by correlation saying how can we not just get rid of it, but also put that in its place while also learning to live in the real world and having a good balance. Not saying it's all bad, but it's just like how can you have balance in your existence?
I think it's like, the principle is moderation, isn't it? Like, it doesn't
absolutely,
matter if it's alcohol, if it's whatever recreational drugs, if it's gaming, if it's even if it's something like running. You shouldn't run every day for 5 hours. You'll become addicted to it, right? Like, and so we, I with my kids, I always plan all my chores around breaks from screen time, right? And so there's rules. There's they can't have their phone at night. They can't, and there's times and so on. But on a weekend, weekends are the toughest, right? Because they don't even go to school then, and then so we do most of our errands on the weekend. We do some in the morning, and we do some in the afternoon, and you try to. But I wish I would do a better job. I think there's still room for improvement.
What ages are yours?
13 and 15.
In that teen range there.
Yeah, they're in high school and last year of junior high, right?
Yeah.
So they're in a stage where everybody in their class has phones.
Yeah.
And some of the 15-year-olds have their phones overnight, and so then you're dealing with that. And you don't want to do that. I'm not ready for that.
Yeah.
And I think it's just based on what I believe are the effects of that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You.
And the consequences also of when they have lack of boundaries, where that could lead them to.
Yeah. Well, I think that's just parenting.
Sure.
Like you have to. There's two things, right? One is like safety, love your kids, and all of those things. I think those are just givens as a parent.
Right.
But then one is, this boundary. Like, if a kid is so driven by whatever they want, they would eat just sugar and drink pop and be on their tech all day, right? So as a parent, you have to say, okay, what can we influence? So, and I think that's one way. That's one way to do it. The other way is kind of show. And so we talked earlier about the values, right? Like the values of timeliness, or the values of in my case, one of the values is also kindness. And so one of the things I do with my kids is I try to get a wave every day I drive. So every time they go with me, I try to get a wave. And a good way to get a wave is to stop and let a pedestrian go by, right? Or to let someone go in, right?
I see.
And they're like, oh, I got a wave, right? And so my daughter, who's learning how to drive, she's now trying to get waves too, right? and that is not boundary or education. All that is kind of show what's our values. So I love to cook too, right? And so healthy food and how to make healthy food. And of course we go to McDonald's, we do all of this other stuff, but they see somebody that always cooks and tries to expose them to different foods. And then I've got some success. I think on the eating side, my kids are good. On the drinking side, like there's still too much sugar in their drinks, right? So there I try more just to say drink a big glass of water, and then we'll go from there, so that you hope they don't drink too much of the other stuff. But all that to say, it's not just about boundaries, it's not just about safety or education. I think there's more to kids, right? And they become you. So for example, I have a credit card. Whenever I use my credit card, when I have to put my PIN in, no matter where I am, I do like fake and then sometimes press and then whatever. Like, why do you do that? I go, well, my credit card to this day, knock on wood, has never ever been compromised. Because if somebody has a camera somewhere, they're trying to figure out what's going on, and I'm passing 10 numbers in a few times, and So and then so my daughter who's learning to drive,
Yes.
she goes, can I do gas?
Yeah.
And can I fill up?
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, sure. Here's
Yeah.
the credit card. And I
Yeah.
watch, and she starts doing. I'm like, what are you doing? She goes, oh, I'm doing what you're doing. I have my credit card, right? And so kids are copiers.
Yes.
Even independent kids, they
Yeah.
still learn and
Yeah.
do what
They see.
what they
Yeah.
see, right? And
Yeah.
so I think that's really important that they see
Yeah.
at least good habits eating wise. That they see, that tech thing. I love to watch sports, right? And I watch too many sports, right?
Mhm.
So you got to be very careful when they're
Mhm.
around because they're like, well, you're doing it, right? Now I think there's different levels. I think being on YouTube on your phone is in my opinion, it's worse than watching I don't know a baseball
Sure.
game in the background, right? But and then that whole social media bit.
If your two kids sat you down and said, all right, Dad, you have one shot here,
Yeah.
just one thing that you want us to never forget in life, what is that one thing you would tell them?
Wow.
It's a tough one. But they're like, yeah, if you want us to remember just one thing, and we're going to listen to this one thing with
Yeah,
serious
I'd
consideration.
probably never do drugs. And I say that because my wife owns a funeral home,
Mhm.
and so she buries a lot of overdoses. Or she cremates a lot of people that have overdosed, and it goes so quick, and the drugs are so powerful and so addictive. And there's bad batches and good batches, and like that fentanyl and that. And I'm a believer of the gateway theory. You kind
Yeah.
of start with smoking, and then
Yeah.
you try a joint, and then what's next. And if I could have a guarantee that that's not in their life,
Yeah.
that would be pretty good. Now, of course, that's such a tough question, right?
It is.
Educate, eat well, exercise, be active. There's a million things you want to do.
Yes.
But the point is,
Yeah.
I show them
Yeah.
that, right? I
Yeah.
show them that,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden my daughter says, hey, I want to play badminton.
Mhm.
You always do something like, all right, yeah, let's get you signed up, right?
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
that's all you can do. So I have a fear
Yeah.
of teenagers and the wrong crowd and the wrong thing. And so if I could have one, if they sat me down and they could guarantee me that, would
Yeah.
be
That would put your heart at ease.
you got kids. I don't know if
I do
your
have-
heart's ever at ease.
I have 3.
You got 3 kids, yeah.
Mine
So
are-
I don't know if I'm ever at ease.
Yeah.
You always have something to worry about, whether it's
Sure.
school or a
Sure.
breakup or
Yeah. For sure. Yeah.
And so I think you have quite, whatever that is, you
Yeah.
always have something that you want your kids to be well and be healthy, and it ain't,
Mhm.
no matter what you do as a parent, you're gonna
Mhm.
have challenges and bumps in the road, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah, they have like that direct access to our core heart and their decisions. I mean, our aim ultimately is to see them be independent and do their thing in life, but there's still that connection that we feel.
well, of course.
In relation,
And so
absolutely.
the other thing,
Yeah.
how I treat my wife,
Yeah.
they just know that
Yeah.
my wife and I love each other. So
Yeah, yeah.
that's the relationship.
Yeah.
So my daughter started dating, and
Yeah.
she's meeting these guys
Yeah.
that at least I think they're
Yeah.
nice. And I think that's a huge influence for
Yeah.
what you see at home.
Yeah.
And as a parent, you have such a huge influence,
Yeah.
and you care so much.
Yeah.
And those are the things, right? Treat people kindly, love them hard, be
Mhm.
respectful.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's so many things. Yeah. What's that answer for you?
I think my first commitment when I first became a dad 13 years ago was, how do I not screw up these beautiful things?
Yeah, of course.
And so my approach was more like, how do I just show competence and, having everything like, by example, right?
yeah.
But after doing some significant face flops in life, and I think what I really value now, it really helped me understand, one, that I wasn't designed for perfection, and it seems to me like the world demands perfection, or so it seems, perception-wise. Just don't screw up or whatever. But I want to model something different now, where I really appreciate my my role as a human being not being perfect. So in the midst of my messiness, how can I model what it looks like for me to take ownership of when I drop the ball and show that it's not game over, but there's still a way that we can
Yeah,
grow
there's
and-
ownership, accountability.
Absolutely.
That's a tough one. Okay, so yours would be accountable.
Be accountable with grace, though. With
Yeah, of
grace, like
course.
instead of beating yourself up, saying, "Hey, this goof up was just part of my DNA. In life, I wasn't designed to be perfect. So even when I fumble along the way, how can I, one, exercise grace to myself, saying, okay, you're not worthless as an individual because you goofed this up, but how can I keep on plugging forward?"
Well, that brings you back to the mental health.
Right,
Because
exactly.
We beat ourselves up
Yeah.
over whatever, and then
Exactly.
And it's funny what makes you angry, right?
Mm.
For me, my golf game tells me often. I'll play and I'm having
Yes.
fun, and,
Yes.
I miss-hit it,
Yeah,
and I'm
yeah,
laughing.
yeah,
Life
yeah,
is
yeah,
good. There's
yeah.
nothing going on, and then you have a little, 3 weeks later, you have a miss-hit shot,
Yeah.
and you get so mad, and then I'm like, I wonder what's going on in life that's making me mad, right?
Right. It's a
So
really
you
good
have to go
question.
to the end and
Okay.
then circle back.
And so, okay, so go straight down here.
Yeah, and then you'll go left at the end of this road. Just watch for oncoming traffic
Okay.
on the right.
Right on. Thank you for the heads up. Yeah. No, those are some insightful questions to have access to left here.
Thank you very much.
The
Well, it was
pleasure
very
is
nice
mine.
to meet you.
Likewise, I appreciated our time spent and
Yeah,
our
likewise.
conversation.
I appreciate it.
My
and
pleasure.
We'll see you maybe again.
I hope so. Okay. Have a good
Cheers.
day, sir.
Yeah, take care.
Thank you. Oh, that was fun. Hi, friends. I know some of you have been in and out. It is getting to the afternoon part of the day here. Let me just check a couple of quick things here on my app. I need to see how much time I have left. I have 2.5 hours left for driving. I am gonna go and meet a friend though, because I have promised to attend one of their get-togethers, and then I'll be back again here in maybe a couple of hours time. So I hope to catch you guys then. Thanks for watching this live stream. Talk to you soon.